A podcast. What is the word?
A podcast by Kalugo.
A podcast. No. By Galuga.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Christy, host of Today We Tried, a parenting podcast brought to you by Kalugo, where this season we're doing a deep dive into the fourth trimester. And this week is a deep dive into surrogacy. I'm joined by two guests. First, Agata, who grew her family through a gestational surrogate and is now an intended parent coach. And I know I just threw out some vocab there. A gestational surrogate carries and gives birth to a baby they are not genetically related to. The intended parent is the person who will parent the baby who is born through surrogacy. And my second guest is Angela. She has been a surrogate and now runs a surrogacy agency. Agata and Angela share their personal stories and also give advice that comes from their work in the world of surrogacy. Honestly, a lot of it resonated with me as someone who has been through infertility and just as a parent. For example, Agata shares how she felt inadequate and numb at the beginning of her fourth trimester, and she took charge by taking her baby and two dogs to her RV and just doing everything solo for a week to prove to herself that she could. What a powerful step to gain control and confidence, and I think a lot of listeners and I can relate to that feeling of just, needing to prove to yourself that you got this. I think you'll get a lot out of this episode, whether you're considering surrogacy or becoming a surrogate, or if this world is entirely new to you. I'm excited to hear what you think. So let's jump in. I'm so excited to be here with Agata and Angela and would love to just start. You are in Canada, so I know surrogacy is a little bit different or maybe a lot different in Canada than in the US. Could we just start there with laying out some of the differences?
The biggest one is that in Canada, it's not commercialized. So I realize from state to state in the US, there are different laws, but the ones that it is legal, they generally are commercialized. So a surrogate can be paid to essentially be a surrogate, where in Canada, the main, difference is that it's expense only. So it's considered expenses that you incur during the time of pregnancy and or preparing for and recovery to do this for somebody, but it really is not something you're supposed to make money doing. And that's the main one. There are some different ones, like medical criteria are a little bit more stringent, I think, in the US. I've heard 5 births maximum, where in Canada, we definitely, I've had 7 kids so far. So it's definitely less strict here in Canada, I think.
So 3 of your own surrogacies, right? To be clear.
Yeah, 4 of my own birth children and 3 surrogacies, yeah.
And did you have all 4 of your children before starting to become a surrogate? I know in the US, from what I understand, it's before becoming a surrogate, your own family needs to be complete.
Yeah. And I'm pretty stringent on that with the girls that come into our program too, because I always kind of say, if you lost the ability to have any more children, could you live with that? Are you done? So that if that happened, not that it's never happened so far in our program, and hopefully it never does, but the risk factors involved with doing this for somebody else, we want to make sure that we've done our due diligence. And yes, definitely it is something we want to ensure that people are done having their families, and or at least essentially are okay with if they would not be able to have children any longer. And I was really done after 4.
But that's so interesting. So you were really done, like you knew your family was complete, but you still felt called to be a surrogate for another family to help them grow their family. So is being pregnant for you, like, what is that experience like? Because for me, it's a challenging time, I will say.
It's definitely challenging for some people. And it is not everybody's cup of tea. For me, I think when my certain circumstance, I had 4 children in 3 years and 2 months. So I had my first, 15 months later, I had twins. And then 22 months later, I had my son, who wasn't exactly planned, but we tell him he was, the gift we never asked for. And so I sort of just went into my fertility years and boom, I was done. I definitely was happy with my family, didn't want any more children for myself. But there was a strange feeling of I had 30, had my first baby, and my 33, I was just this weird stagnant feeling of, I really loved being pregnant. I was extremely fertile, obviously. And I had great pregnancies. Even with my twins, I carried to 38 weeks and had to be induced. And I had them all vaginally, no C-section, no epidurals, no nothing. So I thought, I kind of have a bit of a knack for this. And then from there, it just went. Actually, my brother and sister-in-law were experiencing some struggles, and fertility sort of just got dropped inadvertently. Became more aware of it and just suddenly decided, I could totally do this and I should do this. And that's kind of how it spiraled.
As someone who experienced infertility, all my pregnancies are through IVF. Many women face infertility, and Agata will turn to more of your story as well. So I know you get it. When I hear that, I'm like, wow. So bodies can actually work like that. That's how it could happen. And I know that just is. But it's just such a foreign coming from the infertility world and thinking about the difference in those experiences. It can just be.
So you mean you can have children naturally? How does that work?
Right.
Okay, we understand the mechanics. If those things actually happen. So it's so coming from the infertility world, it's even now, to me, I'm so deep into the infertility world that to me, surrogacy is so normal that I'm like, why isn't everybody doing surrogacy? What's weird to me right now? So you just had children and IVF worked for you? How does that work? I have no clue. So I'm so far on the other side of this whole entire spectrum that Angela's a nice balance.
Yes, it's good. I feel like we're maybe three different stories. So Agata would love to hear a lot more about kind of how you came to decide to use a surrogate to grow your family.
So essentially I was 33 or something, or 32. I don't remember now. And I went to my family doctor. My family doctor's like, so how's that family planning coming along? I'm like, it's fine. No problems, whatever. We're trying for the past year, but don't worry about it. And he basically is like, well, you might want to just check yourself out at a fertility clinic, that kind of thing. And I'm 41, just for the record. And I'm like, sure, why not? But I don't really need it. I was seriously offended by the whole entire idea. I actually just wrote a blog post about this entire thing. And anyway, we went. And then they started what I called studying me. And little did I know that was my first stop in 4 clinics over the next 7 years, where one, it became a multitude of explanations. One was first going into unexplained, then it was PCOS, then I had spinal surgery, and it all progressed from there. And so we kind of have a multitude of things where even if I did carry, because I have literally a rod in my spine, it may become a dangerous situation. But in the past, the thing that really stung one day was when one of my doctors, one of the 4 of that 4 fertility clinic, said, "It'd be nice if you could just have a miscarriage so we can figure out if you actually can get pregnant." I'm like,
my God.
Oh.
And these are people who work with, I don't understand. Oh my goodness.
So yes, I was like, okay, thanks for that. I appreciate that. So I kind of went with that. I'm like, miscarriage, a positive pregnancy test. At least we can get something out of here. So never once in 15 years of being married, 17, I don't even count anymore, have I ever had a positive pregnancy test, ever had a miscarriage, or any kind of anything to indicate some sort of fertility. And so whenever we did IVF, whenever we did that, I felt like I was sick. I was achy, my bones ached, and it felt like I was coming down with the flu. No medical explanation, but I can feel like my body literally rejecting the entire idea of this whole thing. So 7 years along comes a friend of mine. I'm at a wedding. I'm going to kind of explain this, how it all came about, so you get the context of why she said yes. Benign wedding. completely like, you think I'm absolutely nothing. But then in the middle of the wedding, you know, classic thing, parents come up and start showing pictures of their young children. And it's a good friend of ours. And we know her, and we know him. And in the middle of everything, I'm just like bawling. And I was like, it's like this thing came up to me, whispered in my ear and said, that will never be you. And that was the end. That was the end of the beginning of like, I've absolutely like, till this day, it was like, oh, I still have shivers down my spine when I say that. And, you know, I was like crying the entire wedding. She goes, are you fine? I'm like, yes, I'm just so happy for you, lying through my teeth. I ended up calling my friend at that point and running to the washroom, which she reminded me of because I must have blanked the entire thing out. And she said in that moment, she goes, I will do it. This is enough. I'll do this for you. But it took us 3 years to actually say yes, because I was like, I'm not ready or prepared to bring anybody into this world because they don't really understand what this world actually is. And I'm not ready to do that. So it took about 3 years to say yes. It took about 12 weeks of therapy to look into the other side of, well, what if I never actually become a mother? How does that actually look like? Like, you have to be able to, I believe strongly myself that when you walk into surrogacy, you have to be able to have a line. I had a therapist that asked me, when will you start living and what is your line? Like, when will you draw the line? And so you have to come in with the end in mind as well, because just because you go down the route of surrogacy, there's no guarantees. There's nothing. So that's how we ended up down that route. And looking down the route of, we were at that point, I was like 38, turning like we were 39. And I'm like, you know, we just need to stop and just say, we need to put all our eggs in one basket. And if this doesn't work, that's it. And the hashtag was trending at one point was childless not by choice. I said, okay, then we'll be childless not by choice. I went in, did IVF, had 4 embryos. And first time through the entire thing, after the first transfer, she was pregnant. There was a strong possibility of having twins, but it didn't work out. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing for her. Here we are, 2022, and we have a healthy, beautiful baby boy. The pregnancy was difficult for everybody. There were a lot of medical challenges, but I'm glad everybody came out healthy. And that's literally how it came about in a few minutes.
Yeah.
Many years of everything in a few minutes. Yeah.
It's such a powerful thing you were talking about, of that, making that choice and thinking through, like, when are you going to start living and not be in the midst of infertility, because it really is so all consuming, and you're living in this. I don't think, you know, I was in it. I had a much easier path through it, but looking back and the amount of anxiety and ups and downs and roller coasters constantly, like, you begin to think that's normal. And then when you're not in it anymore, you're like, oh, I was in this like stress response, this fight or flight, like all the time through that process. And I didn't even realize it till now, being on the other side of it.
I just had a conversation recently with one of our couples, and that's where they ended. It was sort of like, you know, we hear the positive stories of surrogacy, but their story didn't end in a positive note, and they decided to finish their journey in surrogacy as well. And so there's also that other side. When I say that there's no guarantees in surrogacy, there's also, so walking into infertility and walking into surrogacy, know what is your line. What is your line? How far are you willing to go? Because you can literally drive yourself nuts and crazy and ruin and destroy relationships if that is what you're only willing to do.
And I would love to hear. So Angela has a surrogacy agency. Agata, you are an intended parent coach. How did you two originally meet?
Basically, Agatha found me on Instagram, I believe it was, and she had been following me, and she was looking for a possible sibling journey, and we got on. I assumed she wanted to talk about that and enrolling in the program. And then we kind of just got talking about her experience, and she got talking about following me and the things that she liked. And I immediately knew right away. I was like, oh, it turned into like me inadvertently asking her questions. And it was kind of like a job interview.
Yeah. So 1 hour into the conversation, basically what I reached out to Angela for was after the end of the journey, because we went on an independent journey, so we didn't go through an agency. And what I reached out to her was like, okay, is every single journey like this? Because if we go down a sibling journey, is this what I experienced? Am I going to experience this again? Because if I is what I experienced, and I'm not going to do that again. Because it was hard. It was medically very difficult and very challenging for her. Again, when you are doing an independent journey, so anybody out there who is listening, I would strongly recommend that you always go with an agency, because when you go on an independent journey, you are the agency. You are the emotional support. You are the absolutely everything, and you are that one person. So when I went into Angela, I said, okay, I might be considering a sibling journey. Is this what I'm going to experience again? And then I had all these ideas of how to make things better for intended parents. And 1 hour in or something like this, Angela starts asking me HR questions. And I'm like, and at the end of the call, I'm like, I go to my husband, I think I have a job.
So yeah, would love to hear from you. I know you've described the pregnancy itself as being half pregnant, like while you were having a surrogate carry your child. Coming into the fourth trimester, what did you think that might be like? And what did you experience kind of especially in those early days?
So again, I just want to preface this that every single individual intended, I'm going to say very specifically, intended hetero mom, be very specific with what I say, will experience things differently. So this is from my perspective and my point of view. I just want to be clear about that for anybody who may be listening to this. So when I walked in after Thomas being born, I thought my vision of what I thought would happen while we were doing surrogacy during the pregnancy, I thought we would all hunker down in some kind of cabin, kumbaya, and like enjoy our fruits of the labor, like amazing cave women or women, like this is what we'd be doing. Like we'd be like celebrating the fruits. And what actually happened was completely opposite. And what that was is that I realized that we had been so intertwined together in like this threesome that I needed to remove her from my family now. And that was a painful process because my first month was, I was numb. My husband took over. I didn't really have anything to give. I was doing the motions, but I wasn't sure what I was doing. Throughout the process of the whole surrogacy, I doubted my abilities to I realized I had doubted my abilities to be a parent. And it's because so much stuff happened. So the process that I realized that I needed to do for myself was a complete separation. That took not going to the cabin and celebrating and being, like picking berries and being all that and hiking. And it meant a physical, mental, everything separation in order for us to become the family that we wanted to be without her being so intertwined in every single aspect of every single detail of everything that was going on, because that was our relationship. It's harder with a friend because you know them and they know you. And so at that point, I needed to do that. And in order for me to come back to center, I literally took my baby, took the 2 dogs. We went up to the RV. I went solo. I think it was 6 weeks. I went solo for 1 week with nobody. I said, I need to do this by myself. And I need to prove to myself, nobody else, that I can do this. Because so far at that point, everybody's like, you can do this, but I didn't believe in myself. So I needed to believe in myself, because if I can't carry this baby, then I need to believe that I can do this part. I can do this 4th trimester, that I can do this and beyond, the thing that I've been talking about for years and years and years and years, that I can do this. And by doing that, I not only proved to myself, I gained my own confidence and gave my own strength. I cried a little. There was this one moment when I went to this coffee shop up there in Barry's Bay, and these women that were in their, probably late 50s looked at me, young mom, bought me a coffee and like, it's okay, dear, you'll be fine. Like, you'll be fine. We've been here. And I'm like, oh my God, that's such a recognition of like women to women. But that was sort of how that all started. And so for me, it was definitely a separation that needed to happen between us as a couple and the child, and us as her as the surrogate. We all acknowledge this. She knew it. She had told me this was going to happen. I was like, no, we're just going to be like all together all the time at all points, because that's what I was. And what I meant by half pregnant is that I felt all the emotions. I felt everything. I felt the anxieties. I felt like at one point there's things that are happening, especially medically, if she's in hospital, that you have no control over. I have no control over. And you just want to be there and help her and intervene. And I never was in a position that I wanted to be her. I wasn't attached to the pregnancy. I didn't need to be pregnant. That wasn't a part of me that I had buried and was fine with, like completely at peace with. But the part that was the half pregnant part was definitely the aspect where I couldn't help my baby on my own if there was something going on. And you're so involved with everything that's happening, every single like moment, kick, like, you know, exactly what's going on is sort of what I mean being half pregnant. So my mind was completely there. Physically, I was not going through everything. And that's how I kind of describe half pregnant. I don't know if that makes it a good description or.
It makes sense. So that moment where you decided you needed to take Thomas and have your own space, like, how did you find the courage to make that move?
I just go. Like, I'm just one of those people that I just go. People are like, how do you go hiking solo for 5K or 10K with your baby? I just go. The mindset before that is, I don't want to do it. 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 I'm going to do it. And then I'm like, okay, so what if I don't do it? What's going to happen? It's not going to happen. Okay, I'm going to go. I'm going to go. I'm going to go. I'm going to go. It is not that it's easy. It's not that it's an easy thing. It's hard. But until I decide I have to go, I just have to go. There's no other option. It's like, I need to do it, because if I don't do it, who's going to do it for me? Nobody's going to do it for me. So
that was really no different for me either with 4 kids. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I had 4 kids in 3 years, 4 kids in the age of 3 and 2 months. I think my oldest was just got out of diapers. And it was like, oh, you need groceries? So I guess you're packing up 4 kids and you're going to the grocery store. You need to do dishes, or you need to do this. Well, then I would strap one twin in a carrier this way, one twin in a carrier that way. And thank goodness the first one was, you know, walking. And toodaloo, you just do it. You just kind of, you know, you could sit and just be like, it's so difficult to do this, so difficult to go, and logistically you're managing things. But I was in the best shape of my life because I was lugging all these kids around, and we are always busy because they never stop moving. And Agata hasn't even experienced walking yet. Just wait. All my kids are like 11 and up. So it's I'm in a different phase now, but I remember it's very, very easy to say, I don't want to, especially when you're tired, you know, you're going through all of the recovery stages and everything else. And to be like, no, I don't want to, I don't want to, but you don't get a choice. The choice is not really a choice, you know, and that's what you did sign up for. It's easy to just say, I don't want to do it. But when you do it, you feel good.
Yeah, like on last Saturday, I was like, the weather, I was terrible. Best example, I went outside. It takes, you know, forever and a day to get ready. So I was like, I'm going to go for a hike. I'm going to go. I don't want to. Oh my gosh, it's raining outside. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Oh my God, I got to take the dogs. Oh my God, I have to feed. Everything. But then I get to a point of like, okay, that's all done. So I can just sit here and we can just play with like blocks, or I can go outside because it's for my mental health. So I will lug all of these creatures, all 2 dogs and the baby, in a hiking carrier, and I will just go. And when I got outside, it was raining in the car, and I'm like, this is not a good idea. But I'm like, okay, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? It's going to rain. We're going to get there 40 minutes and it's going to rain. And then we'll just turn around and he'll just have a nap in the car. And I just would have driven around for like, you know, an hour or so. Okay, whatever. So I just went, and it turned out to be glorious. It rained like spat a little bit. And then I just went. And by the end of the thing, I was feeling so good, and it just like recharges me completely. I think that my advice is to anyone, and Angela was mentioning about the physical, like the physical recovery. In the aspect of an intended parent, there is no physical recovery. And so what needs to happen is you need to find your thing that will give you that grounding.
Mm-hmm.
In my case, it's my physical activities. I need to go and find a mountain or something. I got to go hike. I got to go outside. I'm going to be in nature. And that's really grounding for me, because the challenge with an intended parent is you don't have the stop. You don't have the physical part to make you slow down. You are the same person physically who you were before birth and after birth. There's no change. Mentally and emotionally, you're different, but physically, you're not. So also, I think a recognition of that part is important.
Yeah. And you have an entirely new identity as a new parent, and you're dealing with the sleep deprivation part, which is a big part of it too.
It is.
Even if it's
totally
not the
is.
physical side, the mental side and the impact on you with that is huge. And I think that's really smart to call that out and recognize it too, because you could easily push yourself too far.
Oh, you can easily push yourself too far. And then at the same time, I find that you're also dealing with, or I dealt with my trauma of infertility, but perhaps there are women who walk into surrogacy or intended parents, and they've never actually dealt with the trauma of their infertility. And now that all of a sudden is flowing into their parenting, because now they have what they've always wanted. And how do they deal with all of those emotions? So really, a self-awareness is critical. If you're not dealing with the physical, the key thing I think is the self-awareness of yourself, where you are emotionally, is even more so a pressing factor when you're an intended parent who has received their child via surrogacy.
In the program, we see a direct correlation to and we've been talking about this lately, actually, about trauma and helicopter parenting, being almost to the point of the trauma has affected, and you're fearful of this human that you now have after trying so hard and years of trauma and going through that. And for some people, they can't detach from those fears, even though now that it's come to fruition, they cannot separate all of the trauma from that. And if they've never really dealt with it. So even in the program, we were connecting with some people who could help some of our intended parents through that in the very early stages, and then she actually ends up, the doctor we were talking to actually ends up working with children really early to help them through it. And I think it's an interesting piece that I've been doing this now for going into my 7th year. And it is definitely something I'm noticing. And now I'm being acutely aware of the couples that I take into the program. Have they gone through that and dealt with that? Because the surrogacy journey, and for a third party person who is virtually a stranger coming into the relationship, it is important that she understand you are prepared and ready to deal with all of the ups and downs that'll come. And some of it is out of our control, and some of it you can't really predict. But for the most part, if you haven't dealt with your own traumas and talked to someone, or are dealing, not even just dealt, but actively dealing with those conversations and having that ongoing therapy to truly close the door on that part, it can affect everything moving forward. So I'm acutely aware of that. And I mean, I guess on the other side, as a surrogate, I'm more aware of those traumas than anything, because I don't have them. And so when I see and I have conversations with people going through this, it's very easy for me to actually pull myself out of it, because I haven't been through those traumas, right? I have I'm extremely objective, and I don't have those things that make me almost prejudiced to that experience.
And Angela, could we talk about your experience in the 4th trimester as a surrogate, and both kind of what that felt like for you, and maybe advice that then in running an agency you give to your surrogates as they're heading into the 4th trimester, and what they're going through and that transition for them?
through my own experiences, been able to say, this is normally what happens. This is normally what you can expect. And these are the things you can prepare for. But everybody is different. And so like we just had someone who had a planned C-section, her first surrogacy, but it was her third C-section last week. And so I've been in touch with her, trying to keep in touch with her every day just to say, hey, how are you feeling today? How are things going? And she said, day 3, which is when I said to her, day 3, be prepared. Day 3 is your day of the blues. And even if you don't have a baby, your hormones are dropping and everything is going through your body just as though you had a baby. Your physical being doesn't know that you were a surrogate. It just knows you carried and grew a baby and gave birth. So you have to be kind to yourself and understand that there are things that are going to be new, that are different when you have a child that is yours and you're keeping it and you're going through the motions of the other parts. And then the upside, you can generally recover quicker because you don't have a baby. You can sleep at night. You don't have to get up and feed and deal with the exhaustion of that part of it too. So for a lot of people, it's actually a quicker recovery for surrogates because it's more the emotional versus the physical. For me, I was just like whoop, up and at 'em. I was back to work in a week. I'm pretty sure it was less than that, but I pretended it was a week. And really, I was like, okay, well, I'm done and off I go. And you move forward. Now, if the journey is the birth and everything is that easy, then the recovery, like I had a surrogate I had to convince to stay in the hospital a month ago for more than 3 hours. And I'm like, okay, you're not driving yourself home. You just had a human being come out of you. Like, stop. But she was just like, okay, gotta go. Like, I've done my part. Let's go. And again, she was an experienced surrogate. So you're looking at a lot of different emotions, more so on day 3 when you go through the aha moment, like, wow, I did this cool thing. I know for me, my first one, I was like, what do I do now? There is this really weird, empty feeling of like, you have this great relationship because our program is really based on building the relationship with the intended parents and the surrogate. And so that you don't feel like you just created life and gave it back to the intended parents and now you're gone. Our program is developed so that you feel a part of it as this baby grows and everything, because you're actually just friends with these intended parents now. And I've never had that not come to fruition with couples and surrogates. And so they feel, even though it's completed, it's not goodbye. So they still get to see this beautiful child grow up and be a part of their family. And then you get that sense of accomplishment. And we walk through what that'll look like and feel like for the first little bit. And it will be weird. I tell women, you will just want to go home and just be with your own kids, that mama part of you, all the hormones rushing and everything, that's innately what you'll want to do. You just want to go home to your kids and eat them up and just snuggle with them for days and just, go through that. But be kind to yourself and understand that it looks different for everybody. And you might feel like a super champ a couple days later and just want to get moving. And then others, they really do want to take that time to take time off work and just spend some time with themselves and mentally recover. I had one girl who took off with a friend, went up to the cabin for a week afterwards and just zenned out. She did some yoga and just hung out with herself and her friend and just worked herself through it, came back and felt 100% better. So we just really try and stay in touch with them, stay tuned into them, and really make sure they have everything they need during that recovery phase.
Going back to the relationship that you had with your friend who was your surrogate, and you thought you were going to be all together in the cabin, you then needed that separation. How has that relationship kind of evolved then over time?
So we are still very much in touch. We send pictures. So my husband was over at her place and brought Thomas over, and her mom was there and that kind of thing. So we're still very much are in touch. The friendship has changed and has morphed into something a little bit different, but I think maybe that's a time and space situation. So I don't want to comment on like that part, but what I can say is that, again, you have to remember that what I went through and what our intended parents and surrogates are go through specifically a program, which is why I really press on the fact that it's a lot better to go through a program with an agency than go independent, because some people are like, oh, I'm going to save money. You're not saving yourself anything. You're saving yourself you're giving yourself a permission as an intended parent to just be, to just experience and not take care of the logistics, which is what I did. So the relationship, I just messaged her. I think my husband just saw her on Monday, gave her back the placenta that was in our freezer since birth. She wants to do a ceremony, like a cord cutting ceremony for herself and plant a tree. It's not that there isn't an ongoing relationship. It's just very different than I had imagined that it would be. And I would imagine that that part can look different for every intended parent. Again, I really don't want to generalize here, because we are all individuals and we all go through emotions completely differently.
For me in the program, our job is to control the expectations, because when you go into this without somebody who's been through the experience, without the actual, help to control those things, you go off into the cabin in the woods yoga retreat idea, right? And so our job is to really be realistic, honest, and set the expectations so that you aren't way out in left field with what each of you wants. And every single step of the way, from the very beginning, before they ever even talk to surrogates, it's about setting those expectations. And when you do, and you say, well, like they'll say, well, how long is this going to take to find someone? I'll say, so again, here's one of the main differences between Canada and the US. Here we are at the mercy of women who we are so grateful that come into the program, but that could look different. We could have 4 in 1 month, you could have none. It isn't something we can control, and setting those expectations for timelines and relationship and birth and pregnancy and communication and all of those really important things. That's what Agata didn't have, right?
Yeah.
And when you have someone to say, no, reel it in, because that is an unrealistic expectation. And, or even if you think you are friends, and I cannot stress this enough, even if you think you are friends, you may begin with this great altruistic nature of helping one another in so many ways. And truthfully, because intended parents help surrogates too, because this is also a wish and a want for them. And so when you go into that without someone to mediate in the middle and say, no, you have to leave those things to us, whether it be finances or emotional support, just logistics. Okay, so this morning I had a surrogate who, her period came late, so she had to cancel her ultrasound baseline appointment, and then the clinic couldn't accommodate, and she was kind of losing her marbles, and she's like, I gotta go to work, and I got my kids, and I gotta get it, and I can't do this and blah, blah. I'm like, go to work, relax, take a deep breath, I will book the appointment. And so call the appointment, let everybody know. Our job is to just keep everybody flowing smoothly. And now it's done. Okay, Friday's your appointment, 3:00. This is what it costs. You have to have a full bladder and blah, 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 blah. Everything from start to finish is about expectations and helping flow in the middle as sort of I see it like a river, but in truth, it's to just take the stress off everybody on the outside. There are things you have to do, but I want the surrogate to worry and focus on growing a baby. And I want the intended parents to take care of what she needs. But the logistics and the mechanics and all of this stuff in between is leave it to us. And we help the emotional side of things. Expectations are everything.
No, very clear. And that's very true. And this is why I think that going through the journey that I went through, and now that I'm an intended parent and work with intended parents, I'm very aware of of all of everything that Angela said in terms of like expectations and recognizing that I didn't have that support. I very much value everything that we do. And this is why I think I can help intended parents set those expectations as well, because then I'm like, you may want to think about these things, right?
Right. No, I mean, having been through it and having had the experience you had really gives you that perspective and it sounds like you've just been very thoughtful and intentional along the way now, and are offering really great advice to people considering surrogacy. I mean, in Canada, because it's not compensated beyond expenses, you may not know this, but is it more common that it is like a friend or someone who has some relationship with the intended parents? No. So it is just women who want to become surrogates are still, most of the time, there isn't any existing relationship before.
Not usually, but I mean, I have had people who have found each other and then they want the assistance. So I have a different program for that, right? Where you're like an already matched program. So they happen to find each other and then they still want this, like I screen the surrogates, I make sure they qualify, get them to the clinic, do all the blood work, all of this stuff. So there is that process, but I would say more often than not, the friend component or the sister component, that part of it is I'll do it for you. But then they find out what it entails.
Mm-hmm.
And they find out they have to stick their butt with injections for 10, 12 weeks. They start going, then their heart's in it, but then they're like, oh, do I really want to do this? And I would say the majority of people who actually come as surrogates who've actually seen or had people in their lives or on the outskirts of their lives who have experienced difficulties. And that's what triggers in them that I've been really lucky. I've had no issues. I've been able to carry babies. Maybe it's just something I do. And to be honest, my journey in starting was triggered a lot to do with my brother, but it was really like our family, like we were all like, I'm not doing it because it was our family. And if something went sideways, if something went wrong, it could potentially tear our whole family apart. And plus my brother is a bit of a control freak and so am I, so it probably wouldn't have been a great idea. But there are things about family members that people don't understand. Oh, I got my sister to do it, it would be great. I'm like, yeah, okay. But have you thought about this? Have you thought about if you come to blows on certain issues, because it's more difficult to talk about it because you're actually related. It's more difficult to talk about it because you were pre-existing friends, you know, and those things people don't think about. They're just like, oh, it's awesome. I don't have to, it's so weird to have a complete stranger do it. And you're like, actually, it's actually sometimes easier to have a complete stranger do it because you don't come in with anything. Right?
Again, the expectations are different. And we just talked about expectations. The expectations from both sides are different. And you get to build a relationship, which then becomes a beautiful journey through the building of your relationship and the building of what you're doing together. And then that's the part of the surrogacy. That's a part of the surrogacy journey, which is different. And I think this is, that's part of, I don't know how it is in the US and if it's the same kind of relationships that women have with, in terms of like a commercialist, but I find that it's very much that building of scratch. You're building somebody from you. But have you ever been at a bus stop or anything like this and you start talking to that person that's a random stranger and somehow in like half an hour you've told them your whole life story and you've resolved your issue? Like, haven't you ever had that experience? It's kind of like one of those things I find that, you know, you might find it so odd to have this stranger do it, but they don't become a stranger.
Well, and you're building the relationship in the context of surrogacy, and it can be much easier, I would assume, to like lay out the ground rules and the expectations very clearly because you're starting from scratch there. You're doing this thing together. You're not bringing everything else that you've had before kind of into that relationship. So that makes a lot of sense to me. So in closing, I just would love to hear from both of you, starting with Angela, advice you would give to someone who is considering becoming a surrogate. Kind of what would be the top things to think about as they're deciding whether to go on this journey?
take a good look at where you are right now in your own world and whether this is conducive. I mean, it is a huge commitment. I used to look at it, look at it like, oh, big deal. I'm just carrying a baby. I can carry babies and juggle at the same time kind of deal. But as I got older, my last one, I was 41. It wasn't as easy as the ones before that. And then you get going and you think, I'm superwoman, I can do this. And I love when women come up with that notion. But then what happens is, again, expectations. What happens is all of a sudden they have a failed transfer or early miscarriage, or, for whatever reason, things get held up and it takes longer than they expected. And all of this, the bells and the whistles and the fantasy idea of being this amazing person, it gets challenged. And so what I tell women is, you have to be resilient. You have to be patient. You have to feel like you are in a time in your life where you have support, because that's a big part, not just from us, but if your husband doesn't support you, your partner doesn't support you, that's a problem. And you have to have support for your kids, and you have to be able to talk to people about this. You can't hide it in your closed world because it's a big thing. You have to have the idea of what you're going to tell your children, how you would see the worst case scenario unfolding, and how you would handle that and deal with it. It is about more, and a lot of people say, why? The why factor. You have to have a why factor. It's not like you woke up one day and you were like, oh, you know what I should do today? I should have a baby for somebody. There's something that triggers it, and there's a why, and the why is what drives you. But the why's got to be strong enough. If the why isn't strong enough, when those challenges come, it will knock you down a peg. And then I'm here to pick you back up and to move you forward. But you have to have that core strength and resilience about you, because without that, it'll all fall apart. And, brilliantly enough, over 6 years, I've been able to identify those kinds of women. And know which kinds of women would struggle, and others that will just do it. And even though I don't expect that of them, but that's how they handle their life. They're like, I decided to do this. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it, with a vengeance. I'm just going to go at this. And so those are the women we look for. Those are the women we really pull into the program, because those are the vivacious, amazing, thoughtful women that all have that commonality of why factor. And so the advice is always to just look at yourself, really decide if this is a good time and place, and if you have the right supports, but that why factor is everything.
And Agata, for intended parents who, as they're coming to you for advice or listening to this, I loved that idea of kind of having your line, your endpoint as you're going into this, processing the trauma that you've been through. What other advice would you give or kind of wish you had known as you were preparing for surrogacy through the pregnancy and fourth trimester?
As Angela was talking, I was like, yes, I was like all these things, but I'm going to go back to again, and I want to stress again, before you walk into a surrogacy, make sure that you are in a space that is utterly grounded, and you've made peace with the fact that you're not attached to a pregnancy, you're attached to the outcome, and you really want to be a parent. And the how of how that happens, you're willing to release that. The more an individual is willing to share about their surrogacy journey, the more successful they're going to be as an intended parent. So what is important too is removing and dealing with your element of shame. Because in surrogacy, when you are not the woman who is pregnant with her own child, there could be an element of shame. Have you dealt with that? Have you even recognized the fact that that could be it? Very much so. I find that couples, and I'm specifically hetero couples, who have dealt with all of those pieces, that's what I mean by grounded. They've dealt with all of it, and they're okay, and they've walked into this, and Angela was talking about expectations. They walked into this with a lot of hope, renewed hope. And for me, it was a relief that I don't need to deal the emotions of the transfer. I knew I could do the IVF and the retrieval like nobody's business, like a badass. Sorry, like I'm good at that part. Like I'm good. There's no problem with my body in this aspect.
Yeah, that's so funny. I felt the same way about that. I did like 3 rounds of it. I was like, this is great. And there was we did, I never did like a fresh transfer. It was always a frozen. So it was like, right now, I don't have to worry about waiting for that call of whether or not I'm pregnant. Like taking that part out of the 3 times I did, I was like, this is excellent. I like my estrogen levels like high. I felt great. But yeah, because the stress part for me was then the like, is this going to stick? Am I going to get a call with a positive pregnancy test? But during the IVF round, didn't have that element to it.
No. So same thing when I walked away and I did the frozen, the embryos are frozen. That was a relief for me. And that was again, my peace and my grounding, where I knew I had let go of the idea of like, I really just want to be pregnant, because it wasn't about that anymore. It was about, okay, we're gonna have a child and we're gonna have a family. That's where that was going. And being really okay with that. Like I'm still okay with it. And I'm still very much like, if I go and we go do a sibling journey, I'm still very much okay with that part. More than okay, actually. Because I can trust my body to do this one part, and I can let go and trust someone else to do the other part, and know that she will be successful. Hopefully she'll be successful in the other part, and let go of the emotional journey of the transfers and all that other stuff. I will be there with her, but it's not me. And so a lot of my intended parents ask me, how can you do this day in and day out? Like, how do you do this job? Like you're reliving, aren't you reliving your trauma all the time? And I'm like, no, because there's a separation between your journey and my journey. There's a separate. You are on your journey, and how you experience your journey is how you experience your journey. And what I did is what I did. It's kind of like how I was always able to do baby showers for people that were pregnant, like friends that were pregnant, and have no attachment to it whatsoever, because it wasn't my baby. It was their day. It's their celebration. It's not me, right? The thing that got me was at a wedding when people were talking about like pictures. Like that's infertility for you. You have no idea.
You never know when it's going to hit you, or the crazy context it's going
to
be.
No. Yeah. Do I hate the part that I wish I could do it for myself for free? Yeah. That's the part that really sucks. So for us to go down a sibling journey, it means that we need to make financial decisions that other people wouldn't really need to make.
It's an incredible amount of money.
Yeah.
And so that's what we were talking about when Angela was like, how easily she can get pregnant and that whole, and I'm like, it's so foreign to me. And I haven't done surrogacy, but even with just IVF and other fertility treatments, it's like the fact that could be the path and is the path for so many women. I just feel I'm like, wow, it's really these totally different worlds that we're in. And so it's important to talk about it and like gain perspective on other, but yeah, it just can't imagine. It's
a different world. Like, how do you do that? How do you like? And my friend laughed at me. It's like, oh, I can show you. I'm like, no, that's okay. I get that part, but like, how does that actually happen? And so you're sort of in the middle that IVF worked for you, but you could have also been the couple that didn't work, it didn't work for you. Like I said, I spoke to a couple on just last week where they were on a sibling journey, and they had come to the end. It had been 3 years of trying with a surrogate, and it's just for whatever reasons, it just didn't work out. Multitude of reasons or whatever, it just didn't work out. And I will never forget what she said to me. She goes, my son is now 9. I still have baby things in my basement. We've been trying since he was 5. At what point, what do I do that is best for my family? And that's a sense of like joy. Where my life changed when I had a therapist, psychologist ask me, when will you find joy in your life? Right. And so I know we all walk into these things, like even the 4th trimester and things, it's all about expectations. Even if you've had your baby naturally or through IVF or through surrogacy, It's about expectations, really finding that thing that grounds you. For me, that's nature. So find that thing that really grounds you, gets you moving. My definition of surrogacy is surrender. There's no greater surrender, especially from, like, if we're talking to women, a woman who can't carry, as we've all been promised since we're puberty, that this is something you'll be able to do, right? Have you processed that trauma? Have you processed that part? Because it will come up. There's no hiding in surrogacy. And also my advice is it's not just a pregnancy. There's a lot more to it than just a pregnancy. All those things that you may have gone through in infertility, they will come up too, because it's no longer your body that's going through the pills, through the transfer, but you're watching someone else do it now. So how are you gonna process that stuff? That's what I mean by, if you haven't dealt with those things walking into surrogacy, I believe that all of that is going to come up for you again in a different way, in ways you didn't even realize. So take the time to heal and be okay, have a line drawn for yourself, and walk into it again, managing your expectations and knowing that if this is your end, and if it doesn't work out, and that you'll still be whole and complete at the very end of this process.
Thank you both. And I just truly appreciate, I feel like you've shared such wisdom that applies across the broad set of experiences that people will have coming into the fourth trimester, whether or not they have used a surrogate, have a surrogacy relationship or not. And so I appreciate you both being here and sharing your perspectives and stories.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us, Christy. Much appreciated.
Today We Tried is brought to you by Colugo, a baby gear brand founded by parents for parents. I'm your host, Christy, and our producer is Mike Pilak. Stay tuned for more, and in the meantime, remember, you got this, and we've got you.